In our chemistry project, Lawrence and I will be talking about the chemistry in various types of paint and the use of them in different types of art. We will be specifically talking about acrylic, oil, and watercolor paint, and answering various questions that are commonly asked when referring to different paintings. Topics we will include are bonding, stoichiometry, polarity of molecules, solubility, and gases within various formulas. An overview of paint. Paints contain pigment, prime pigments to impart color and opacity, binder or resin, which is a polymer often referred to as resin, forming a matrix to hold the pigment in place. Solvent, sometimes called a thinner, either an organic solvent or water, is used to reduce the viscosity of the paint for better application. Waterborne paints replace some paints that use volatile organic compounds, such as the hydrocarbons, which are harmful to the atmosphere. And additives, which are used to modify the properties of the liquid paint or dry film. When a person is referring to paint, all of these ingredients are included.
A lot of thought is put into every type of paint. Most paints are formulated according to their proper use: primer, undercoat, and special finishes. Raw pigment powder is then broken down into individual particles which are coated by and dispersed in the binder, known as wetting out. Solvent is then added to give the required consistency.
To start off, we will begin with acrylic paint. Acrylic paint is one of the most, if not the most common paint to be used by artists today. It is relatively cheap and lasts a very long time. Acrylic paint is a synthetic paint that uses acrylic plastic resins. The binder resin in acrylic paint is man-made and very toxic. It is made generally from the monomer methyl methacrylate and also any real common catalyst. The catalyst speeds up the reaction to where the monomers create extremely long chains. These chains result in polymethyl methacrylate, an acrylic plastic polymer. Pigments in acrylic paint are mostly pure elements like pure cobalt powder and carbon charcoal, or they are basic compounds like cadmium sulfide. Cadmium sulfide is one of the main starting points when creating vibrant acrylic paint. It is formed by reacting cadmium chloride with hydrogen sulfide to make bright yellow solid. It is then washed and heated to make a spectrum of different colors.
Secondly, we will discuss oil paint. Oil paint, when of high quality, is extremely expensive and extremely toxic. Similar to acrylic paint, both are bound in high-strength polymers. Oil paints are pigment-bound in oil. Oil paint is a type of slow-drying paint that consists of particles of pigment suspended in a drying oil, commonly linseed oil. Such oils are called siccative or drying oils and are characterized by high levels of polyunsaturated fatty.
Oil paint has been used since the 12th century for simple decoration, but was not widely adopted into artistry until the late 15th century. Oils and man-made plastic polymers, such as acrylic, are unable to fully dissolve in water. To fully break down oil paint, one must use a paint thinner to break the bonds of the polymers. Paint thinner, which is extremely toxic, is able to break down nonpolar bonds in oil paint. Common solvents used as paint thinner chemicals include acetone, toluene, methyl ethyl ketone, MEK, dimethylformide, DMF, and xylene. Gases that are let off from paint thinner are very harmful, making it necessary to open a window when using oil paint. The process of creating oil paint is very obscure, being that it can be formulated in many different ways. Some common questions that are asked about oil paint are as follows.
Why do they crack? Different types of oil paint vary in reasons when it comes to aging. In many Renaissance paintings, one may notice the many cracks and impurities in the paint. This is most commonly due to aging and the type of oil that was used in the production of the paint. This question will be answered more in depth next. What kind of oil is used? Linseed oil. Made from flax, linseed is the most popular due to its flexibility and resistance to cracking. It does, however, have a strong tendency to yellow with age. Walnut oil, poppy oil, and soft safflower oil are also used. Much less likely to yellow, these thin, clear, watery oils are much more prone to cracking. Oil and acrylic paint are both nonpolar, unlike watercolor, which we will be talking about next. Lastly, watercolor is the cheapest and is also one of the most commonly used paints today. It is formed quite simply and is one of the most versatile mediums used by artists. Watercolors are pigments bound in water-soluble medium called gum arabic.
There are two distinct formulas when referring to watercolor. In a tube, which is first a gooey substance like oil and acrylic, and the harder version that many of you may have seen in your third grade art class. Watercolor paints are made by mixing powdered pigments, coloring substances, with a special glue called gum arabic. The gum arabic holds the paint together and keeps it from flaking off the paper when dry, as mentioned before. The gum arabic is the resin of a watercolor. Just as acrylic and oil have specific resins that aid in the bonding to the canvas, watercolor uses this. There are many benefits of using watercolor. Some include easy cleanup, less paint that is wasted, and no additional harsh chemicals are included besides the actual pigment. When using watercolor, it is better to use specific paper. Unlike drawing and printmaking papers, watercolor paper contains sizing, which reduces the absorption of paint into the paper itself. The pigments remain on the surface of the paper, so the colors remain brilliant. To conclude, all fine art paints share few properties that make them different. Oil paints are pigments bound in oil, acrylic paints are pigments bound in acrylic polymer, and watercolors are pigments bound in a water-soluble medium called gum arabic. Paint is versatile and fun to use, making it a staple in any artist's life.